Why are we so afraid of our pain? Pain is the thing that we should pay the most attention to because it signals something has been lost, and we lost something in '07.
When a nation is ambivalent about its past, silence grows and festers.
In December 2007, Kenya descended into a wave of intercommunal violence. Unprecedented in scale and horror, perhaps the darkest chapter in our history as a nation.
The Havoc of Choice is more than fiction. It's a reckoning. It's a mirror. In this special Power Panel Bookshelf episode, we explore the Havoc of Choice with Wanjiru Koinange and delve into her imagery of women and family in times of national crisis.
There's absolutely pieces of me, of my experiences, of my people in that book, and my people being my family, but also Kenyans.
One of the things you wrote was this lovely book, which I want everyone to see, The Havoc of Choice, a bestseller, is based around the 2007 post-election violence. Maybe you could just give us a short sentence about the book and who the female characters are.
Yes. Fantastic. I'm happy to do that. And first of all, you have the first edition of that book. So and there's only 300 of you who have that very first
Oh,
one.
I borrowed it from my niece. She lent it to me, and it's actually signed by you.
Oh, I'm gonna get
Yes.
you your own signed copy. We'll make that
Yeah.
happen. So the
Mm.
Havoc of Choice tells the story of Kavata, who is a woman in her early 40s, married to a man called Gugi. She's a daughter of a political animal called Honorable Muli, and also has two children, Waja and Amani. And they're kind of the central family in this story. Of course, like other middle class families, there's a whole ecosystem around them. They have drivers and housekeepers and people who exist to make their lives easier. So they have a driver called Thuo who's married to another incredible woman called Chepto. They have a housekeeper called Scholar who goes through some really terrible experiences. Actually, everybody goes through something terrible in this book. But the kind of central character, then through kind of framing the story around a kind of middle class, upper middle class family in Kenya, and the people around them, we get to see exactly what happened across classes in Kenya, from the political class with Kavata's parents and eventually her husband to the people who I've mentioned, Scholar and Thuo, who end up kind of living their lives in service to this family. So when as Kenyans do, we all travel up country to vote, and that's what happens in '07. People travel to vote, and when the violence breaks out, every single member of this family is in a different part of the country. And through their journeys home, you get a really clear picture of what those days were like in '07 and '08.
Tell us about Wanja.
Yes, yes. Wanja is the daughter of Kavata and Muli, firstborn daughter. She is just entering university at a school that is very much like USIU when we meet her. But she also is very much inclined to politics. So she's active in her university political groups, student politics groups. She's active there, and she's engaging with with the election the way that we should, from a point of information and not of popularity. And eventually doesn't end up getting to vote in that election because she has a massive fallout with her father, which I won't
Mm.
spoil. But she's one of,
Mhm.
I think, the kind of central voices because she's kind of a central voice because she's overlooked a lot. So whenever she enters a
Okay.
story, she's really shouting to be heard.
Mhm. And Amani?
Amani's her little brother, the character that I get the most flack for because of his fate. I don't want to give any spoilers, but
Don't
no
spoil
spoilers.
it. What struck me about your writing was your treatment of women in that book, and also this relationship between women and their fathers.
Mm.
Now, they say, and in fact, you've said, I want to read something that you said so that I know that I am on solid ground. You said there are pieces of myself and everybody who has been in my space over the 30 odd years of my existence. And that is why this book resonates. So, in
Mm.
many ways, what you're saying is that this book, there are parts of this book that are actually a reflection of yourself. You're actually, in a subtle way, writing about yourself, your own feelings, to a degree, while you tell this intricate story about a very difficult time in Kenya's history. Now, in the treatment of women, and in these portions of the book that you relate to a relationship with the protagonist and her father, what are the three, four things that you're saying about yourself?
Wow, that is that is an incredible question and one that I haven't received phrased in that way. There's absolutely pieces of me, of my experiences, of my people in that book, and my people being my family, but also Kenyans and Nairobians and people generally. And that relationship between Waja and her father, for me, I think the piece, because Waja at the time I wrote that book was the character with whom I resonated the most. We were the same age, or just about the same age, and our experiences of that post-election violence were similar to any other of the characters. I was in Nairobi, I was by myself, and I can't remember why, but I was really watching the election that I was very involved in 2007. I was very involved in that election because I was still working for Eric Wainaina, and he had been commissioned to do a series of events around the country that got the youth to turn out and vote. That was his entire mission: get the youth turnout higher than it was in the previous election. And we were so proud of ourselves because we did. That election had some of the highest turnout in terms of youth numbers. So that election was very special to me. It was my second time voting and my first time being so actively involved in anything civic or political for that matter, although it was more on the civic education end of things. So Waja, like myself, has always been a person who likes to be underestimated. I really value being underestimated. It allows people to not see me coming when I come. When people tell me I can't do something, I'm like, thank you for saying that, because now I'm gonna have to prove you wrong. And I think it also represents a part of my relationship with my father where I was constantly tussling for him to hear my voice.
Interlude 1. Invisible Wanja.
Wanja believed her little brother was her superpower because the day Amani was born, she became invisible. No one paid mind to how true her statement was, so she embraced the ability to vanish into thin air whenever her brother was around, and got so good at it, she blended in even when her brother wasn't around to soak up whatever attention was up for grabs. Eventually, she became an expert at being inside rooms she didn't belong in.
So a lot of the times now when I reflect about interactions with my dad, I am a lot more gentle and I have a lot more grace for him because he was interacting with me in that way for the first time, and I was expecting all of this like wisdom and knowing, but he'd never had a daughter like me before. And I think that's what Wajai and Gugi really struggle with. She thinks that there's correct ways for him to run his politics because she's been silently watching and studying the way that the campaign was run. She has opinions that are based on something, but because she's a young 20-something-year-old woman, she kind of just gets dismissed by everybody, including her dad.
Interlude 2. The Outburst.
Enough! I am going ahead with the campaign, whether or not I have your support, and quite frankly, I don't need it. A few months at university does not make you an expert. Gugi left his meal halfway eaten and walked away. A stunned Wanja sat there with her mouth hanging open.
So I think there's moments there when I'm just like trying to give her and maybe myself a bit more voice at that time. I think the thing about writing and writing stories that are so close to home is you kind of have to allow yourself to change your decision about things. And I have to read the Havoc of Choice again to see if I still stand by everything that I may have portrayed then. But I think that I do, and I think that the reason that it has done so well is because I was so careful about the emotional truth when I wrote that book. I didn't want to get that wrong. I didn't want to have Kenyans finish the book and feel like I'd played them or had misrepresented what happened in '07. And I don't believe that I did. And I think that's why 5 years later, it's still a bestseller.
There are two relationships, father-daughter relationships in your book there's also the relationship between the key protagonist, Kavata, and her father.
Yeah.
And I wanted to understand that relationship vis-a-vis yourself, because I wondered whether throughout that book and the way in which she shaped her decisions was to get the attention of her father at the end of the day.
I I did a lot of work with that relationship. It kept coming back from my editors being like, we don't believe this bond. We don't believe that. We don't believe the things. My editors did not believe that Kavata felt the way she did about her father because my portrayal of it didn't make sense and it wasn't believable.
Interlude 3. Kavata's Dilemma.
I've spent my life doing this exhausting dance, where I try to create as much distance from my father as possible, while still remaining respectful and present, because he's my family. It's my duty to honor him.
But the reason that I wanted to put Honorable Muli in the book is because a lot of the time, and even I was guilty of really judging Kavata's decisions, right? And judging everything about how she dealt with her father's privilege, how she dealt with all of the discomfort around being a politician's daughter, and then her decision to completely run away from it, and in turn also ban her husband from ever following the same tracks. And for me, people would often, and even I in the beginning would often judge Kavata, but I'm just like, where does the blame begin, right? Why would you blame Kavata but not her father or her mother, who kind of created this kind of environment through which she would have all of these difficult decisions to make? I wanted the women in my book to see the men they loved for their faults, to continue to love them, but to take their faults and be like, this is who he is, and I'm gonna have to separate the politician from the father, my husband from the father of my children, which is why when Kavata leaves, she leaves the kids at home because he's a terrible husband. He's betrayed me, but he hasn't betrayed his children. So why would I separate them? So in a sense, I was trying to bring in the kind of decisions that I see women in my life making all the time. My elder sisters, my aunties, when they're having to look at the men they have chosen, who have been chosen for them, and choose to have to accept them the way they are, and then navigate around these men. And I think both those women spent their lives trying to do that. Some successfully, maybe others not.
Interlude 4. Kavata's Impulsive Choice.
I will call you and the kids as soon as I have had time to settle down. Leaving you is painful. Leaving them is excruciating. I have thought long and hard about taking them with me, but you have done nothing wrong to them, and they don't deserve to be separated from you. Please protect them, and please do not allow them to hate me, if you can.
I found that the women in this book, the key women, there are four of them, were very feisty, very strong willed, very outspoken. Is that a reflection of yourself?
It's a reflection of the women in my life, honestly. And I received this question recently at Sundance. A documentary about my work with Washuka was premiering. And the question we received is why there's not a lens of feminism covered in the film. And I get that question again about my book. And I'm just like, if you grew up in Nairobi, women run things in this city. Fine, the patriarchy is real, and we always wanna see that. But if you really look at the things that are working in Nairobi, in Kenya, often it's a woman behind it. In my family, where there's lots of uncles and fathers around, but the women are the decision makers. It's almost like um, we do the dance to kind of sadly keep the patriarchy alive. But in a sense, the women in my life do not tame their voices. Sometimes they will, but they will do so strategically. I have learned as a last born in a big family, when my voice is needed and when I need to whisper to my brother or my uncle so that the message can get across. Because I'm constantly having to look at a message and be like, am I the right vehicle for it? Am I gonna let my vanity insist that I am and risk not passing the message forward? And that's the way that the women that's around me, my friends, my mother, who is my rock right now and has been for a long time, that's how she moves around the world, very unapologetically and very much aware that we're gonna have to do this dance subtly and with all of the flow until we trick them into giving us all the power. But we have it. Um, and
Okay.
and and that's why the women in my book are so fiery. They're just a reflection of the women that in my life, and hopefully of me as well. Hopefully I'm growing into one of those women with a strong voice, and that for me is one of my consistent goals.
Just a final question around this book. You placed the tragedy of the post election violence within a family and within a middle class family. Now, in Kenya, we really live in a society of those who have and those who do not have. And the ones that have are deemed not to not to struggle, not to have tragedies. And if they have tragedies, they're deserving of all their tears because it's karma.
Interlude 5. Chepto's Hard Truths.
You don't understand that every little thing you do affects Sisi Watu Wadogo. We are small people because we are always the ones shifting our lives so that yours can stay the same. You don't know it because you never live with the consequences of your choices. Just like these politicians, you will never suffer a day because of this election. You and I are not the same. And to think that we are is stupid. Kenya ina wenyewe, and you are one of them.
So I wanted to know, in writing this book, what kind of feedback did you get because it was focused on a middle class family? Would it have been different if you had, for example, focused this story on, a small family in a rural village somewhere in Kenya?
Hmm.
What do you think?
I the feedback I get is not so much about the point of view, it's about the character's experiences. So I get a lot of questions
Mm-hmm.
about why did Amani have to experience what he did? Why did Chepto be the one who had to be in Nakuru? Why did Scholar have to experience what she did? And I think the decision for me to frame this in the family that I did was twofold. One, it's the piece of the story that I felt the closest to. I could touch that family. I could almost eavesdrop into the conversations around the dining room because it matches my family the most. My father wasn't a politician, but his father was. The turmoil around and my father died at about 57. His father died I think he must have been in his early 20s when he lost his father. So dad was always kind of being told, you've got to follow in these footsteps. But my dad was not a politician. He was a farmer. He was somebody who wanted to be around his kids all the time. So politics would never have been the thing that he chose. But I've always heard about what it was like for him growing up with a father who was in politics and the lack of presence that was there. We don't talk about my grandfather a lot. Most of the things that I know about him, I have read in books or found out um, from 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 film. I heard his voice for the first time about 2 years ago on Showmax, and I'm just like, that's what he sounded like. It's crazy. So I really, in a sense, was trying to tell this story because it's the one that I could touch the most. I could eavesdrop the most into the family, a middle class family in Nairobi, like the one I represent. But also, before I wrote this book, did about 9 to 12 months of research. Even if I was in Kenya, I had worked on that election, I experienced the '07 violence. At the point when I was writing the book, it was 2012. So 5 years had passed, and I wanted to remember the things that I thought I had experienced or witnessed either by watching news or just driving around the city. And the stories I weren't hearing were about the middle class Kenyans. I heard about the slums. I heard about rural Kenya. I heard about the kind of centers of the city, but never around like what was the middle class experience. And that's why I also chose to tell that story because I hadn't read it yet. That is not true now. There's been lots written about the '07 since and from different perspectives. But at the time, that's the place where I thought my voice would be clearest.
So it was also an act of courage on your part to go where no one else had gone.
Yeah.
And
Oof, I had sleepless nights about that one. Yeah.
hmm and and you also were, in doing so, not sure what kind of response you would get.
Absolutely. It's a big story to tell. It's a big story to tell in the detail that I had at that time, and I think any time. And my insecurities and my worries about it I mean, it was 8 years of working on this book. Between me sitting down to start it and it hitting the bookshelf was 8 years. And every single one of those years, it was a redraft and a rethinking and a questioning, am I the right man to tell this story? Um, and, and earlier on, I referenced the emotional truth of it. I think as long as I was sure that I wasn't misrepresenting anyone, I didn't want to talk to anybody to kind of feed from the experience for this book. I didn't interview anybody. I just relied on what was already documented. Um, and the reason I was worried about the feedback was because I'm a young Kenyan. I was in my 20s then. I'm a Kikuyu woman. We know about the tribal relations of this country. And did I have the right to be saying all of these things, to be reminding people of what happened and of who we can become if we don't really buckle up and assess ourselves well. And the way that I got over that was by really testing this book with different audiences. So it was published in the UK first. A lot of the editorial process was done by foreigners. I had a Latin American editor. My agent is from Bangalore in India. My publishers are from Britain. So there was lots of global voices telling me what the story should be. And they were good. I loved the team that I worked with. But in year 7, just before we thought we were ready to go, I remember it was an election year it was 2017. I think that was an election year. But I was really anxious to get the book out, but there was still a missing piece because I hadn't had a Kenyan editor read it. And so I found one, a good friend of mine called Otieno Reno, and I told him, I've written this thing, it's about to come out, but my intuition is telling me to check it. And he was the most different. He was a man, he was Luo, he grew up in Kisumu. So we were a different background. And I'm just like, you're going to be the one to read this book, and I want you to trash it. I want you to tell me all the things that trigger you, all the ways where my bias, and everybody has bias, where my bias is showing. So I can assess them, I can stare the bias in the face, and I can decide if I want to stand by the things that I'm saying. And that is why that book, I think that elevated my novel to the height that it is in now, because Oti showed me all of the ways that I had overlooked some things. And he's like, if you're gonna be emotionally true, then you can't say these things. When you place blame for the violence, you place blame on this person first, and it's okay to do it. Just know that you're doing it so you can defend it. And it was even details like street names, like that road you mentioned wasn't built in '09; it was built the year after, so change it. And that's why when Kenyans read this book, it feels like it was designed for them, because it truly, truly, truly was. I wrote this book for Kenyans. I wanted them to really see who we were in those terrible 2 weeks, almost 15 or so years ago.
Interlude 6. The Elixir of Prayer.
After days spent watching the country burn, hearing gruesome stories of hurt, loss, and heartbreak, Kenyans drew back the curtains of their homes and unlocked their doors. When they were sure all was well, they packed their families into their cars and did what they were taught to do in the face of a crisis. They went to church.
So I want you to listen to a sound bite from one of the guests I had last year. Her name is Jada Ekube, and she's the Deputy Global Director of Crisis Action.
You have to have courage to face all that feedback and still say, but this is bigger than me. This cause matters.
Now, it's a short clip, but a powerful clip, because she says that facing feedback, negative or positive, is courageous, but it is fired by the cause.
Yeah.
What was your cause? What was your cause that gave you that resilience to face the feedback, whatever it was?
I've never described myself as even innately political. I've never thought I cared about politics. I never thought I was engaged. I never thought I cared until I wrote this book, and I could somehow remember who was a minister for education in 1996. And I was like, why do I know that? I'm like, why do I have all of these pieces of Kenya's politics ingrained in my brain? And and then when I accepted that I care about the way that our country is governed, then it became about assessing the way that or not assessing, but just kind of watching how we election now. Elections are supposed to be such a wonderful moment for Kenyans. We're supposed to be proud about going to pick our leaders, and I think it's one of the most powerful moments for citizenry. But since '07, what happens when elections are coming around is that we begin to hear, oh, we should slow down business because elections. Is your passport valid because elections? Things, elections. And I'm just like, why? And that is because we didn't heal from '07. We go into PTSD every time we have to cast a vote. And that's why I wrote that book, because we have been stripped of the thing that gives Kenyans voice. And we've been stripped of it by the lack of care that was taken around '07. I only realized this when I moved to South Africa. And as soon as I would say that I'm Kenyan, guys would be like, oh, shame. How are you guys doing? 5 years after the violence. And I'd be like, we're fine. What are you talking about? The economy is doing better than ever. We've healed. We've moved on. And they're like, you think you've moved on? No. The things we saw on news, you guys can't have moved on from. And that's the reflection that even spurred me to write that book, because I'm like, if people watching us can see our trauma, why are we refusing to see it? Where do people who lost homes, lost loved ones, lost properties, where do they go to commune together and talk about what life is like post '07? I didn't find a space like that when I was doing research. And that's why I'm like, guys, we've moved on from this thing way too quickly because we were told to accept and move on. But what have we lost in moving on? Why are we so afraid of our pain? Pain is the thing that we should pay the most attention to, because it signals something has been lost, and we lost something in '07, and we won't even look at it. And that's why the book matters to me.
Interlude 7. Kavata's grief and pain.
She stopped bothering to hide the tears that now flowed relentlessly from her eyes. Her tears watered the grief which grew inside her like yeast, and she did not want it to end. She wanted the pastor to pray for her family's grief to somehow be transferred to her so she could carry it until it killed her.
It's why I love when I hear people reading it either with their parents or with children who weren't around, or young people who weren't around or don't remember '07. Because we've got to remember, these things weren't done by outsiders. It's us. It's Kenyans who did the things that we did. It's our leaders, it's our neighbors, it's our friends, and we've really got to sit with that. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but I do like that when people read the book, they remember, and that I hope that they then begin to approach elections a bit more consciously in the future.
Okay, I mean, that's a good enough cause. That's a powerful cause.
Thank you. I truly enjoyed this conversation.
I would invite you to purchase this important book and walk in the shoes of all the characters. Come to your own conclusions about individual responsibility in building a culture of peace, justice, and understanding within our communities and our continent. Thank you for joining us. Listen to Wanjiru Koinange's full leadership story on episode 7 of the Power Panel podcast Echoes on Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. This is the Power Panel podcast.